Hi, everybody. My name's Madeline Marshall. I am a New York local of 10 years and a certified tour guide. And today I'm going to take you through some strategy and logistics tips for the New York City Marathon, which is a day that many New Yorkers, including myself, call the best day of the year in the greatest city in the world. I'll be running alongside you all out there here on November 2nd. This will be my 10th marathon and my fourth New York. And I'm also coaching a handful of athletes for the race this year. So this content is very near and dear to my heart. Could definitely talk about it all day. If you have any questions, definitely refer to my website, which is listed below as well as in my bio. And there you can find other services that I offer, from strategy calls if you have additional questions, to tour guide services if you need help with your trip to New York, as well as coaching services along with pricing. But before we get started, I just wanted to start off by saying that we can't wait to welcome you to the city. Signs are starting to go up all along the course, and people are already out there in Central Park cheering for people training. It's like the most heartwarming thing ever. All right, so the overall goal for today is to really get you feeling confident and excited for the race. I remember my first marathon, which was New York. I was so stressed out about the logistics. And so I'm hoping that this will help calm some nerves. But in terms of what we'll go through today, we'll start off with an overview of the New York City Marathon. We'll then talk a little bit about pre-race day, so everything from the expo to the weekend. We'll spend most of our time, of course, talking about race day, so everything from the start to the course to the finish line. And then we'll end with some additional information. Okay, so starting off with some key statistics, the New York City Marathon attracts over 50,000 participants each year and obviously is one of the most iconic marathons in the world. I've now done 5 world major marathons, and I do have to say that New York is still my favorite. It is, however, known to be one of the most, if not the most difficult of the 7 world major marathons. It has an elevation gain of over 850 feet. It does have a slightly greater descent, though, so there's definitely a lot of downhill as well. And the iconic course begins on Staten Island, taking you through all 5 boroughs and across 5 bridges, ending in Central Park. Another thing that I'll mention is most of the neighborhoods that you'll be passing through are quite residential. So I really think it's special because you can see where New Yorkers actually live. These are definitely very neighborhood-like vibes. So you're not really running through like the crazy tourist areas of the city. You're not running through Times Square. You actually do that in the New York City half, but not in the New York Marathon. You're not running by the Empire State Building. You can see the iconic skyline from the Verrazano Bridge as well as from other parts of the course, but it really is just a very authentic New York City vibe as you're running through the 5 boroughs. All right, so here's the course profile at a glance. We'll be going into much more detail about this later, but as you can see, you'll start out here in Staten Island and you'll go across the Verrazano Bridge, making your way through Brooklyn. Actually, a lot of the course is in Brooklyn before you cross over the Pulaski Bridge into Queens. That's about here. And then you cross into Manhattan across the Queensboro Bridge, up First Avenue, into the Bronx, down Fifth Avenue, and finishing, of course, in Central Park. Now, in terms of the elevation profile, you can see here there's lots of hills. It's definitely not a flat course. Even the flatter parts of the marathon are quite hilly. So again, we'll go into more detail, but here you can see this is the Verrazano Bridge at the start of the race. And then some of these other notable inclines. This is the Pulaski Bridge at the halfway mark. This is Queensboro Bridge. And then this is the famous Fifth Avenue climb, as well as rolling hills in Central Park. Right. So in terms of the race weekend, the first thing that you'll want to hit is the New York City Marathon Expo. This is located at the Jacob Javits Convention Center, which is all the way west in Hudson Yards. You can get there by taking the 7 train, but it is kind of out of the way from most hotels, so definitely make sure to plan accordingly. The expo is open Thursday through Saturday. You should have already selected an expo slot, but it is fairly flexible if you need to change the day that you go on. I would personally recommend that if you're in town on Thursday, that's a great day to go. I actually volunteered at the expo on Thursday last year, and it wasn't super busy. Everything was moving pretty efficiently, and there's not as many people. There's typically quite a lot of people who come on Friday and even Saturday to do the bib pickup. And so if you get it done Thursday, you're done with it, you can kind of get off your feet. You can also spend more time at the expo if you go on Thursday because you're not so worried about having to save your legs. They do have a lot of like photo ops and cool things, lots of freebies at the expo. And so it is kind of cool to take advantage of that as well. All right. And then, of course, you have to pick up your bib in person. There is no proxy pickup available. They do check your ID and make sure you are who you say you are. And there's lots of other things available at the expo besides just like the freebies. They have pace bands that you can pick up if you have a goal time. And at least last year, they were based on the elevation profile. So it will kind of account for any elevation gain or loss in the mile splits, which is super helpful. Okay, so obviously the main event, the main reason why you go to the expo is to pick up your bib. So I did want to spend a little bit of time on understanding what your bib means. So New York Roadrunners earlier this week released the bib assignments as well as all of this wave start time information that you'll see listed here. But basically your bib is based on your NYRR best pace, so that's a 10K equivalent, or predicted finishing time when you registered if you haven't run an NYRR race. And so basically they take those times and they will slate you into a wave. There are some charities that might slate slightly differently, but for the vast majority, you're slated on time. And so there are 5 waves based on these approximate predicted times. Wave 1 being the fastest runners, wave 2 being the next fastest, and so on. And each wave will correspond to a start time. So you can see here we have the start times listed, wave 1 starting at 9:10, wave 5 starting at 11:30. And off to the very right, I've included kind of the pacers that will be in each wave, which correspond broadly to what the runners in that wave are likely to run. Wave 1 around 3:15 or faster, wave 5 kind of in the 4:20 plus range. So within each wave, there's also 6 corrals. So corrals A through F. Within each wave, corral A having the fastest predicted pace, all the way through wave F. So it's basically like goes 1A through F, and then 2A through F, 3A through F. You get the point. Within each wave and corral combination, there are 3 different colors. So those 3 colors correspond to where you're going to stand at the start. And they do slate them kind of based on fastest runners within each wave and corral combination, but that part is not necessarily important. The important part is that you know where to stand based on your color, and there's going to be plenty of signs. You're not going to miss it. But just for context, because I remember when I got my first wave assignment, it was like, what does blue wave mean? I remember I was blue 3A, and I was like, what in the world does that mean? And I had no way to find it out. I guess I didn't know about like Reddit or anything at that time. But blue corresponds to the top right of the Verrazano Bridge, orange to the top left of the Verrazano Bridge, and pink to the bottom of the Verrazano Bridge. So the first 5K, each of these waves are going to be doing slightly different things. Pink is actually going to take a little bit of a different route once it gets off the Verrazano. only for the first 5K. Orange and blue are basically doing the same thing, but on different sides of the street. And then after the first 5K, pink's going to come together with orange and blue. You're going to be on different sides of the street depending on the color. But then at mile 8, everyone's going to come together. So mile 8 and beyond, it does not matter what your color is. And they're all very similar routes. Pink being at the bottom of the Verrazano Bridge, there's not quite as much of an elevation gain, but it all kind of comes out in the wash. They're all relatively the same thing. So at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily matter what your color is. It just matters that you know what to do with your color. But again, it is very confusing. And another thing that I wanted to mention with the waves and corral assignments coming out this week, I've seen a lot of people worried about being placed in wave 4 and wave 5, asking if there's still going to be people out on the streets cheering for them. The answer is yes. New York is out all day. Do not worry about whether you're wave 1 or wave 5. There will be people to cheer you on. They cheer for every last person who comes through the finish line. So do not fret about that. It's going to be a great experience regardless of what wave you're in. All right, so now talking about the rest of the weekend. So once you knock out the expo, definitely encourage you to spend time exploring New York. It's an amazing city. Definitely try to stay off your feet the best that you can and obviously prioritize rest and sleep. One good suggestion could be like a Broadway show or a show of some sort, because that kind of makes sure that you're staying off your feet. Um, Thursday, you'll want to start your carb load. So New York is obviously a great place for this. We have amazing food, all different varieties, as well as incredible Italian food. Friday, you'll want to obviously keep carb loading and enjoy the events the city has to offer. There are a lot of pop-up shops, a lot of events, a lot of panels. So definitely do what you can to like really take advantage of things, but try not to tire yourself out too much, obviously. Saturday, you'll really want to stay off your feet this day and prioritize eating, carb loading, all of that good stuff, and definitely going to bed early because it is an incredibly early start. On Saturday at 8:45, there's actually the Abbott Dash to the Finish 5K, and that will be starting at the UN, ending in Central Park. And they typically have an elite field for that. A lot of people run, a lot of family members run, maybe family members of people who are runners, but not necessarily running the marathon. This is a great option. Unfortunately, it is sold out, but if you are running, I always love this as a shakeout run to run with your family. I will be there. And if you opted for bag check, you will have to drop off your bag at 69th Street in Central Park West by 5 o'clock on Saturday. And of course, you'll want to make sure that you set out all your clothes for race day, pack your bag. You're likely going to want to bring some clothes that you can toss at the start because it could be a little bit chilly out there. Do you want to call out that you need to donate these clothes? So you're not allowed to do the bag check in the start village. You have to check your bag the day before. And obviously, like bring any nutrition, hydration. Portable phone chargers, definitely something I always like to bring because once you get out there, your battery does start to drain pretty quickly. And you obviously want your phone to not be dead when you finish the race and you're trying to meet up with your family. And then Sunday morning, of course, you're going to wake up before the crack of dawn to get out to Staten Island for race day. All right, everyone's favorite topic, transportation to the start. This is known as the marathon before the marathon, and a big reason why people get so stressed out about the New York City Marathon. I've heard people say that they don't like the New York Marathon because of this, which hurts my heart if I'm being honest. But I think it helps if you know exactly what to expect. And it also helps if you appreciate why we have to take such a long bus or ferry ride to the start. And obviously, it's because we have to run through all 5 boroughs. So, literally, would not be possible if we didn't take transportation out to the start. The good news is it is daylight savings the night before, so it is a super early morning with how early the buses and ferries start running. However, you get at least 1 extra hour of sleep than you would have otherwise, which is definitely needed. Um, and so New York Roadrunners will include all of this information on your bib and will tell you at the expo, but you should have already selected your transportation out there to the start. It would have asked you to either select bus or ferry. The buses leave from the New York Public Library, and then there's also some leaving from MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, and then the ferries leave from Whitehall Terminal. And so it would have asked you to select a method as well as to select a time slot. And they do typically only give you time slots that should get you to the start in time for your wave. So as long as you chose one of their options, you should be totally fine to get there in plenty of time for the race. If you do want to change your transportation for any reason, there is a transportation booth at the expo where they'll allow you to change it subject to availability. But just main story here is like, don't worry about missing your transportation or missing the start too much. Like worst case, you just start in a later wave. I remember when I was running my first marathon, I literally thought like if I miss the 5:30 bus, I'm not going to be able to run the marathon. I like took it so seriously. But that kind of leads into this next point about the different methods and what the pros and cons are of each in case you do want to change. So the bus runs from 5 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. So obviously super, super early. The ferry runs until 9 a.m. So that runs later into the morning. So the pros of the bus takes you directly to the start village, and it's typically pretty quick. I believe in years past, like I can't remember it taking much longer than like 30, 45 minutes. It is pretty quick. There is a little bit of a line when you get there to line up for the buses, but it moves pretty efficiently. And the bus is very convenient for runners who are staying in Midtown or Uptown or who are in earlier waves. So think waves 1 and 2. The cons of the bus is that the last bus leaves at 6:15 a.m. because they have to shut down the Verrazano Bridge at 7 a.m. And so if you're in a later wave, you're going to be out in the start village for a long time. All right, so moving on to the ferry. The ferry, like I said, runs throughout the morning, so from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. It is known to be very scenic and iconic because you're going through New York Harbor. You can see the Statue of Liberty. You can stand outside. They do have seats inside as well. But it really is just like the picture perfect, picturesque New York City Marathon fall morning. And it is more convenient for runners who are maybe staying downtown or if you're in later waves. So if you're in wave 5, it's kind of nice to be able to take a ferry at 9 a.m. rather than having to take a bus at 6:15 a.m. However, the main thing that I like to call out with the ferry is it can definitely take longer to get to the start village because not only do you have to get on the ferry, then you have to go on a bus. So you basically have to do both with the ferry. And whenever I took the ferry a couple years ago, it definitely took longer, like door to door, than the bus. So just it kind of depends on your own situation and what you prioritize. All right, so the start village. This is in Fort Wadsworth in Staten Island. And so once you get off the bus, you'll follow the crowds and go through security. This can definitely take a couple minutes. They are pretty strict with their security for the marathon. And then after you go through security, you'll see signs for the 3 different start areas based on your bib color. And so there will basically be a blue village, a pink village, an orange village, and there will be sometimes like different charity villages as well. And each start area will have the porta potties as well as some refreshments. The porta potty lines definitely can get long, so you'll want to plan ahead and make sure to get there in plenty of time so that you can use them. But do know that there are additional porta potty lines in the corrals once you start to line up. So don't get too stressed out about that. And like we mentioned, you'll definitely want to have extra clothes to wait in the start village. You can see here, this was my dad when he ran it in 1997. But just like general sweats that you don't mind donating are always great for this. You can read on the New York Roadrunner website, like what they allow and don't allow. But typically any sorts of sweats or like a robe, a lot of people like to wear, those are all allowed. I think they typically don't allow blankets, but I don't know how strictly that is enforced. But in years past, I've actually like worn a Snuggie, so it's almost like a sweatshirt blanket. And very important point here is that you most likely are not going to have cell service at all in Fort Wadsworth. So if you're planning on meeting up with people there, have a point in advance so that you know where to meet them, because of the 3 times that I've run last year, I think I did have a little bit of service, but the other 2 times didn't have service at all. And you'll also want to communicate with anyone that you might be planning to see along the course. So any family that might be cheering for you, get all of that sorted out the day before, because you're not going to be able to communicate once you're out there. Okay, so here's the official map of the start village. So you'll see this is the blue village, the orange village, and the pink village. But like I said, you can go into any of the 3 areas. They're simply like the best spot to get to your corral. So like the pink village will be the easiest to get to the pink starting area, which again is the bottom of the Verrazano Bridge. Orange will be easiest path to the orange start area, and blue easiest path to the blue start area. But you'll see here there's other landmarks. They typically have, like I said, refreshments. They have therapy dogs. They, in years past, give out little Dunkin' hats, which people like to get. So there's definitely quite a lot to do in the start village, but you'll just kind of be hanging out there until your wave is called. All right, so the loading area in the start line. So you'll hear your wave called, but the corrals will open 30 minutes to an hour before each wave start. The exact times are listed on the website, and they close between 15 and 25 minutes before, depending on your wave. So definitely plan accordingly. Once these waves are closed, they are closed, and they will not let you in to that wave. You'd have to wait for the next wave to start, which isn't the end of the world, but this could result in your family being very confused if they're out there cheering for you and expecting you to come at one time and you're not there, especially if you don't have cell service. So definitely plan accordingly for that. Also wanted to note that if you do want to start in a later corral or later wave, that is totally fine. You can always move back a wave or a corral, but you just can't move forward. And like I mentioned, there's plenty of porta potties within the waves and corrals, or within the corrals. So my tip is once they open, just go ahead and get into those corrals, and you can always go into the porta potties once you're there. You'll get into the corrals, and then you'll all start to walk towards the start line, and they'll collapse the corrals. So this is important. Like, say there's a pacer that you're wanting to run with that's in the corral ahead of you. Typically, when they collapse the corrals, you can kind of just walk up to the pacer. So then they will sing the national anthem at the beginning of each wave. They will have a cannon go off. It's like a legit cannon. Every year, people like jump at it. And then they play Frank Sinatra's New York, New York as you start to cross the Verrazano Bridge. And it's like probably my favorite. I can't say that it's my favorite part because there's so many of my favorite parts, but this is like the most iconic start to a race, going across the Verrazano Bridge, seeing the skyline, hearing New York, New York. It is the best. You're going to love it. All right, so let's get into the first 5K of the race. This will be starting on Staten Island and going into Brooklyn. And so mile one, as we saw on that elevation chart earlier, is going to be the most uphill mile of the whole course. Good news is it's mile one, you're feeling fresh, you're crossing the Verrazano Bridge here in New York, New York. So it's not going to feel that hard, but it is important to make sure that you're staying controlled, not going out too fast, really just taking in those views and taking in the atmosphere. Mile two is straight downhill. So you're going straight down the Verrazano Bridge. And here you definitely want to pump the brakes a bit. It's an easy mile to go way too fast. Funny story, in my first marathon, which was New York in 2021, I PR'd my mile time, mile two of a marathon, which is a horrible idea. And then you'll come off the Verrazano Bridge into the neighborhood of Bay Ridge, which is a super residential area. You'll see lots of families. And like I noted before, blue and orange will have roughly the same route for mile three, but pink is going to go down a different street for about a mile before everyone converges onto different sides of 4th Avenue. And so orange, once you get to 4th Avenue at like the 5K point, orange is going to be on your left and blue and pink are going to be on the right. So miles 4 through 12, you'll run through the remainder of Brooklyn. I do have to say that Brooklyn is my favorite borough of the New York City Marathon, despite being a Manhattan girl. Brooklyn always brings the energy, and Brooklyn is also, those miles are relatively easy in relation to the rest of the race, both because they're earlier on and Brooklyn is flatter than the rest of the race. So this is definitely a great stretch here. Between 5K and mile 8, you're going to be running straight up 4th Avenue. This is a really great place to lock into your pace. You don't want to go too fast, but you can definitely, click off those miles and start to really get comfortable there. You'll see a lot of different neighborhoods. Again, lots of very residential neighborhoods, Sunset Park, Park Slope. And then shortly after you reach the marker for mile 8, all of the colors are going to merge onto Lafayette Avenue, and you'll start going through the neighborhoods of Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. Mile 8 is known to be kind of a tricky point in the race, so there can be at points a little bit of a bottleneck because everyone is merging. And then there's also one of the first major hills coming shortly after that. But the good news is on Lafayette Avenue, it always gets super loud. There's always tons of crowds. Typically, there's a lot of bands in that area as well. So once you hit around the 15K mark, you're going to turn left onto Bedford Avenue and you'll be on Bedford for a little bit. You'll get into South Williamsburg right around mile 11. And at this point, you'll encounter what's known as the Silent Mile. You'll know when you get there because there's not many fans. It is a Hasidic Jewish neighborhood. The Satmar sect of Hasidic Jews live there, and a lot of them, just for cultural reasons, they don't necessarily cheer for the race, but they may be crossing the street here. So you'll definitely want to look out for that because every year that I run this, I'll see collisions, and obviously you want to avoid that. So it is a little bit quiet there, but at that point, it's kind of a good chance to like check in with yourself, enjoy the quiet, because once you get to North Williamsburg, it is deafening. Like the the lanes get so narrow. There's like fans in your face. It is so loud. Definitely the loudest part of the marathon, and it's like in your face. So definitely soak up that energy when you are in North Williamsburg. You'll know when you're there. You can't miss it, but it is so fun. And then after you go through North Williamsburg, you'll pass by McCarran Park and into Greenpoint as you head out of Brooklyn. Next, for Queens and the surrounding bridges. So at the half marathon point, you'll cross over the Pulaski Bridge, which is bridge number 2, to get from the borough of Brooklyn into the borough of Queens. I'm not going to lie, this can be a sneaky bridge. People don't talk about it that often, but it is about a 400-meter climb, which is not short by any means. It's not super long, but it can be sneaky. And also, given that it's at the half marathon point, at this point, you need to be feeling good. Like, if you're not feeling good at this bridge, you need to take some time to like reset, because you still have another half marathon to go. So, really stress the importance of feeling good at this point or doing whatever you need to do to feel better because it's definitely a challenging stretch coming up after this. Coming off the Pulaski, you'll spend about a mile in Long Island City, which is part of Queens, and you'll definitely want to soak up that energy and really prepare for the Queensboro Bridge. So, towards the end of mile 14, you'll then climb up the infamous Queensboro Bridge, so your third bridge. This, I feel like, is the most notorious part of the New York City Marathon. My personal opinion is that it's really not that bad, but it is about 1,000-meter climb, and there are no spectators. So you're really there alone with your thoughts and with the other runners. So again, this is really a good chance to check in, reset, take in the quiet because you're going to be preparing to head into Manhattan where it will be very loud and very lively. You'll start to descend on the bridge and you'll already be able to hear the crowds from Manhattan. And since you're going on a downhill, heading into Manhattan, once you get to the top of the bridge, you'll definitely want to hold back because the First Avenue stretch that will be coming up is definitely pretty hilly and challenging. So again, this is a really important part of the race and one that you'll hear a lot of people talk about, but I kind of like it. I don't think it's so bad. Miles 16 through 19 will be Thunder Alley and First Avenue. So as you come off the Queensboro Bridge into Manhattan at mile 16, you will be greeted with this roar that they call Thunder Alley. So they call it that because it is deafening. Everyone's waiting to greet you off the bridge and welcome you into the borough of Manhattan. So you'll spend the next 2.5 miles running through the Upper East Side up First Avenue. There's lots of bars and restaurants on First Avenue. So this is like a younger area, lots of recent college grads. It's very lively. It's not like the Upper East Side that you hear about in Gossip Girl. This is a very like young, fun energy. And because of that, there's always great spectator energy. Has a very near and dear place in my heart because this was where my first apartment was at 79th and First when I first moved to the city in 2016. And at that point, I was not a runner at all. I didn't even really think about running the New York Marathon, but I remember cheering for it and being so inspired by the runners. So great energy here on First Avenue. This stretch has a lot of rolling hills. So they're not like any crazy big hills, but you'll definitely notice them. One thing that I always like to keep in mind and remind myself of, though, is it is a net downhill. So every time that you're going up a challenging uphill, just remind yourself of like there's going to be more downhill, especially once you get to like 86 or so. It is more downhill moving forward from that stretch, but early on, there's going to be quite a few uphills. So around mile 19 and a half, you'll cross over into the borough of the Bronx across the Willis Avenue Bridge, which is your fourth bridge. This bridge isn't too long. It's actually pretty short in comparison to the others, but you'll look ahead and you'll see everyone walking because it is, at that famous, right around that famous mile 20 wall that you typically hit in a marathon. I remember when I was running my first marathon, I looked ahead and every single person was walking. And I thought that I was like, am I doing something wrong? I'm still running. Why am I running and no one else is doing that? But it's just because it's at a hard point in the race. And like I said, First Avenue is hard. Your legs are going to be tired from those rolling hills. Um, and so once you cross over that bridge, you'll spend the next mile and a half running through the Bronx, and you're going to have several turns there. The Bronx has good energy as well. There's a lot of times like some bands and stuff. But since it's such a short stretch, I typically enter the Bronx and I'm like, let's get out of here back into Manhattan as quickly as you can. Because the annoying part about the race is you enter Manhattan, then you leave, go to the Bronx for a mile and a half, and then you come back into Manhattan where the race ends. So I always try to think like, use the turns as a way to make it go faster and just like try to get out of there so that you're closer to the finish in Manhattan. So around mile 21, you'll cross over the final bridge. It's really small, bridge number 5, the Madison Avenue Bridge, to re-enter Manhattan and run through the neighborhood of Harlem. So the energy in Harlem is amazing, especially the last couple of years. It's been one of my favorite neighborhoods to run through. So you'll definitely want to take advantage of that energy. The miles at that point are flat-ish, but it is mile 21, mile 22. So it's not easy, but definitely take advantage of what you have in Harlem to prepare for the upcoming climb that you'll get in the following miles. You will do a couple of turns around Marcus Garvey Park, but otherwise it is pretty straight down Fifth Avenue. Finally, for the last 3 or so miles of the race, you will have the famous Fifth Avenue climb and Central Park, of course. So once you start to near the east side of Central Park, so it's around 110th and 5th, you'll spend a full mile climbing. It's 100 feet of elevation gain with hardly any reprieve. You're not going to go down at all. It's just going to be this slow and steady, gradual climb. In my opinion, this is the hardest part of the race because it's hitting at mile 23. So that's a tough point to begin with. But in addition to that, you don't know why it feels so hard. Like you're looking out ahead of you and you're like, this seems like it's flat. Why is it so hard? And then you check your stats after the race and you're like, oh, I was literally climbing 100 feet over the course of a mile. So that's why it's hard. I just suggest put your head down, get it done, like try to keep going. It is probably going to be a slow mile, if not the slowest mile of your race. But you can do it. I definitely encourage you to have friends and family waiting for you on Fifth Avenue at this point because you definitely will need the energy there. And once you reach 90th and 5th, you'll officially enter Central Park at the Engineers Gate. And so they'll have this big sign that you can see here on the right that says, Welcome to Central Park. And it's just like my favorite. I already said it, that the beginning was my favorite point of the marathon. This actually, I think, is my favorite point in the marathon because I train in Central Park almost every day. And so it's like once you enter at this point, it's like you're home. This is home stretch. So you'll enter into Central Park, and this has many rolling hills. So if you're not used to running in Central Park, this stretch may feel challenging. For any New Yorkers who are watching this, who are used to running in Central Park, I actually think that this is a pretty easy stretch of the park because a lot of the rolling hills are downhill. So you'll enter, you'll have kind of like a flat as you enter, and then you'll go down Cat Hill, which is super nice. There is a sneaky little hill after you go down Cat Hill that's uphill, but overall you avoid any of like the crazy uphills in Central Park, which is really nice. And the energy in Central Park is amazing. There's so many fans. Typically the leaves are turning on the trees, so it's just like very picturesque. With about a mile to go, you're going to exit Central Park briefly to run west on Central Park South. I find this portion a little bit annoying because I'm like, I just want to stay in Central Park and finish the race. And when you exit onto Central Park South, it is uphill in a pretty challenging stretch, especially because you're like at mile 26. But there is good energy and fans there. So just do what you can to get through that stretch. And then you'll re-enter the park just before mile 26 for the final about 400 meters or so of the race. And you'll start to see flags from different countries and see the finish line at Tavern on the Green. And at this point, obviously, remember to put your hands up at the finish and soak in that moment. It really is so iconic finishing in Central Park. All right, we made it to the finish. So once you cross through the finish line, you will need to walk about 800 meters to the exit of the park, and that's going to be at 76th Street and Central Park West. So this part is not that fun. You've just finished a marathon and now you get to walk another half mile. Definitely make sure to grab your post-race bag as well as your poncho and snap some pictures at the finish area. You'll definitely want to have those. Um, Also, like you'll have the bag, which will have food, so you'll want to make sure to start eating that food, start hydrating, do all of those things like on this walk out of the park to make it feel more bearable, and your body will definitely thank you for it later. Definitely plan a meeting spot with your family and friends or anyone that you might be meeting up with on the Upper West Side. So they will not be allowed in the finish area. You can see the finishing area here. And this is all runners only. So you'll want to meet up with them. I suggest like somewhere in the 70s and Columbus Avenue if you can pick like a store, pick a restaurant or whatever. Um, and I would try to coordinate that in advance because even after the race, it's so busy with all of the runners and with all of the spectators that you may or may not have cell service. So definitely good to get that sorted out in advance. And also, you'll want to start thinking about what your post-race transportation plan is. The bus, the crosstown bus, as well as the subway are running, and those are likely going to be your best options. It can be extremely challenging to find an Uber or a cab on the Upper West Side because everyone's up there post finishing the race. A quick word of caution, do not take a pedicab. They will lurk near the runners because they know that the runners are desperate and they're tired and they want to get back to their hotel. I made this mistake my first marathon. I was like, there's no cabs around, but look at this pedicab. That would be fun. So I took the pedicab with my friends and we took a 15 block trip, like less than a mile, and they charged us $120. So don't do that. Um, there's other ways to get around, but just be prepared. The finish can be a little bit chaotic, and you'll want to make sure that you have a plan. So that covered most of the logistics and the race itself, but did want to mention a few other things that you'll want to consider for the race. So, of course, plan for a variety of weather conditions. It could be chilly, it could be warm. We've had years where it's been super rainy. So, obviously, just check the weather, but be prepared for that. Pacers will be available in 5-minute increments. There will be additional information on the next slide, but there may be the same pace group present in different corrals, so you can always kind of move around a bit as long as you're moving back and not forward. One really important thing here is you'll want to make sure to account for additional distance, especially if you have a time goal. So with any of these big major marathons or big marathons in general, you may have your GPS glitch at times during the race just because of the sheer volume of people running and spectating. I will say that New York tends to be slightly better than races like Chicago or even like Tokyo because, like I said earlier, you're running through very residential parts of the city. So you're not running through like big skyscrapers necessarily that can interfere with GPS, but you will still likely have a little bit of GPS error. And also, you'll want to make sure to run the tangent line. So, of course, you want to avoid weaving in and out, adding distance where you don't need to add distance. And the blue line, so basically all marathons, all major marathons will mark the course with this blue line. Some races, it's the tangent line, the shortest distance, but in New York, it is not the tangent. So the blue line is there for a reason to mark the course, but don't feel like you need to follow it. If you follow it, you'll actually be going longer than you need to go. So just beware of the map and try to run the tangent best you can, but at the end of the day, you'll likely run more than 26.2 miles regardless. Okay, for New York, I think the key to running a fast race in New York is to lean into the fans when the running gets tough. So, like I said, New York is known to be a difficult marathon, but I actually think I know a lot of people who have PRs in New York, and I think a big reason for that is the energy that you have there. Like the fans do not let you quit the race. They will be cheering for you so loud. So definitely lean into that. And then finally, water, Gatorade, and toilets are available approximately every mile of the race. I don't think they start until around the 5K mark, but they are there. So if you need those on the course, they will be there for you. They have Morton gels, I believe, at mile 12 and 18. And then bananas, I think they're in 2 spots on Fifth Avenue. So definitely look out for that. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this slide, but just for reference, here are where the pacers will be standing. So you can see wave 1 will have pacers from 2:55 to 3:15, wave 2 starting 3:20 to 3:55, so on. Do you want to call out that wave 4 has a ton of 4-hour pacers? So I know that's a popular time goal. So if you have a time goal of 4 hours, wave 4 could be a good place to go if for some reason you're in an earlier wave. And then there's still quite a good variety of pacers in wave 5. Also wanted to give a few spectating tips. So the app, the official marathon tracking app, can be a little bit spotty. So definitely recommend having your runner's location as well to track them if you need to. If you're spectating prior to mile 8, you'll need to know what side of the street your runner will be on based on their bib color. So like I mentioned, I think it is the pink wave is going to be on the right side of the street and the orange and blue are going to be on the left side of the street. Because of this, I typically don't recommend spectating before mile 8 just because it can be confusing. And even if you know your runner's bib color, they may have gone in a different wave. And it's so early in the race too that they could probably use energy a little bit later. The Upper East Side is a great place to see your runner 2 times pretty easily. So First Avenue, between mile 17 and 18, and Fifth Avenue, so between mile 23 and 24, those are just a couple blocks away. So probably a 10 to 12-minute walk. But the runners have to go up all the way up First Avenue into the Bronx, all the way down through Harlem before they get there. So you have plenty of time to walk between those 2 spots. And so my family will always watch on First Avenue, they'll watch on Fifth Avenue, and they'll actually watch in Brooklyn right around mile 8, right after mile 8 as well. So there's easy access from the subway from Brooklyn to the Upper East Side. You can get off at 2nd Avenue and 86, or you could go all the way up to 96, but you could take the Q train from the mile 8 area. So that's pretty convenient, and you typically do have time because it's you're going from mile 8 to not seeing your runner until closer to mile 18. So 10 miles to get on the subway is typically long enough. You do want to make sure to check the MTA for any delays and obviously keep up with how your runner's doing. If they're super fast and the MTA is delayed, might be an issue, but has never personally been an issue for me. And again, cell service may be limited in popular cheering areas. So this is important for the spectators as well. You may want to bring a portable phone charger, especially if you're wanting to communicate with your runner either during or after the race. You want to make sure that your battery is juiced up. Right. So in terms of post-race activities, the finish line will stay open until the final person crosses, which is a really fun and special experience that's kind of unique to the New York City Marathon. I know a lot of other major marathons will cut the finishers off before they finish, but they keep the finish line open. They put on this event called the Final Finishers, and they'll have music and tons of people cheering. and they'll wait for the last person to come through. And so if you finish earlier in the day, highly suggest going out to that event later in the evening. It's just really heartwarming and great to cheer on your fellow runners. All right. And also you'll want to check out Monday's New York Times to see if your name is included. They typically include quite a few of the finishers. Depending on the average finish time, it will be a different like threshold each year. But I think in years past, it's been like everyone who's run around like a 4:30 or faster gets their name in the New York Times. And so this is a really great souvenir if your name is printed. And if you're in town on Monday, they have all these events for what they call Medal Monday going on across the city. So they're all over the place. So they'll have medal engraving at the NYRR Pavilion in Central Park, but a lot of local stores will also do the engraving. And a lot of times the local stores will actually do it for free versus I think you have to pay at the Finishers Pavilion. And then tons of places will have freebies and other deals. So in the past, there have been offers at New York or Nowhere has given out free hats in the past. I hope they continue that. Tracksmith does poster stamping with your time. They have Lululemon, Viore, all these places give great freebies. So it's a super cool day to be a New York marathoner. All right, so that's it for today's presentation on the New York City Marathon. Definitely let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to answer them. As I mentioned at the beginning, I also have my website, which is listed here, where you can find additional information about myself, as well as other services that I offer if you need anything. You can also find me on TikTok and Instagram. My sister Izzy and I have an account. Here we were at the New York Marathon in 2023. She's actually running the race this year, and so is my little brother. It'll be his marathon debut. So we'll all three be out there. Would love to see you all. If you see me, definitely say hi. And in terms of other resources, the official New York City Marathon site is listed here. They have all of the maps and stuff like that. And one website that I could not recommend more, I posted about this on TikTok before, but there's this man from Norway who has run the New York Marathon 45 times, and he is like, he knows everything. So he has this website, and he goes into so much detail about everything, like weather, historical weather, like mile by mile elevation. It's like the most amazing thing ever. So highly, highly, highly recommend if you have a question, go to this website. He knows everything. He's got it all covered. But I think that's about it for today. So best of luck to everyone running the New York Marathon. It is going to be such a great day. It really is the most magical day, and hope you all enjoy your time in New York, and let me know if you need anything.